We are taught that ancient Greece was the cradle of human reason. By day, the streets of Athens were a monument to logic. Men like Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle walked the sunlit columns of the Agora, arguing about mathematics, democracy, and the objective nature of reality. They worshipped Apollo, the god of light, order, and clear sight. To the daytime Greek, the world was a giant puzzle meant to be solved by rigid, unyielding intellect. But then, the sun went down, and the Greeks believed that when the light died, logic became a prison. Every year, the absolute smartest minds of the ancient world, men who practically invented Western science, would deliberately walk away from the light. They entered pitch black forests, descended into damp caves, and gathered in secret, windowless rooms, not to study, not to debate, but to intentionally, systematically lose their minds. Because to the Greeks, daytime logic was only half of the human experience. The other half belonged entirely to the dark. Part 1. The Controlled Psychosis. If you look at history textbooks, a Greek symposium is described as a civilized dinner party for intellectuals. That is a lie. A symposium was actually a highly structured, late-night psychological experiment. It always began after midnight. The room was completely sealed, and at the center of the floor sat a massive ceramic vessel called a crater. To a Greek, drinking unmixed pure wine was considered a savage act reserved for barbarians. It simply made you sloppy. Instead, the leader of the night, the symposiarch, acted like a dark chemist. He mixed the wine with water, but he also added additives. We're talking about trace amounts of toxic herbs, black hellebore, henbane, mandrake, and strychnine. In large doses, these plants cause agonizing death, but in precisely measured, diluted doses, they induce a state of profound euphoria, visual distortions, and mild delirium. This wasn't partying, this was a calculated shattering of the ego. The Greeks called this state mania, a divine madness granted by Dionysus, the god of chaos and the subconscious. They believed that daytime logic was limited. It kept you trapped inside your own biases, your own ego, your own identity. But under the influence of the crater, deep in the night, the walls of the mind collapsed. Socrates himself argued that the highest forms of poetry, philosophy, and prophecy didn't come from cold, rational thinking. They came from mania. They believed you had to temporarily poison your mind just to think outside the box. Part 2. The Eleusinian Mysteries. But the symposia were nothing compared to what happened every September. Just 14 miles up the road from Athens, in a town called Eleusis, the most guarded secret in human history took place. For over 2,000 years, thousands of Greeks made a midnight pilgrimage here. Plato went, Aristotle went, Roman emperors went, and revealing what happened inside the hidden hall of Eleusis was punishable by immediate death. Inside a windowless, soundproof stone chamber, the initiates were plunged into absolute, pitch-black darkness. Here, they were given a sacred, secret beverage called the kykeon. Modern toxicologists and historians believe the kykeon was brewed using barley infested with ergot, a naturally occurring fungus that contains psychoactive alkaloids. It is the biological precursor to LSD. After hours of sensory deprivation in the dark, the psychotropic brew hit their systems. Suddenly, the high priests would rip open a hidden chamber, exposing a blazing fire and shouting sacred words. The sudden transition from total darkness to blinding light, combined with a powerful psychedelic, triggered a massive collective psychological shockwave. Plato later wrote about this exact experience, describing it as a moment where the soul is liberated from the prison of the physical body. When these brilliant men walked out of that cave at dawn, they weren't talking about geometry or logic anymore. They claimed they had looked directly into the fabric of reality. They no longer feared death. Why did they do this? Why couldn't a civilization built on logic just stick to logic? Because the Greeks understood a fundamental truth about human psychology that we have completely forgotten. They believed the human mind is a tense rope stretched between two opposing forces, the Apollonian and the Dionysian. Apollo is order, structure, and intellect. Dionysus is chaos, emotion, and the untamed subconscious. The Greeks knew that if you live entirely in the light of Apollo, if you try to be 100% rational, productive, and structured all the time, the pressure builds up. The intellect becomes rigid, the culture becomes stale, the individual becomes deeply anxious. To keep the mind healthy, you have to let the dark unmake you. You have to step into the chaos of Dionysus to burn away the rot of the ego so that you can rebuild yourself when the sun rises. Look at the world we have built today. We have effectively banished the night. With LEDs, smartphones, and 24-hour connectivity, we live under a perpetual, artificial sun. We demand constant, unyielding Apollonian productivity. We check our emails at midnight. We track our sleep cycles on apps. We treat our minds like machines that must always run logically, efficiently, and cleanly. We look back at the ancient Greeks and copy their geometry, their philosophy, and their laws, but we completely ignored the psychological safety valve they left behind. By refusing to ever step into the dark, by pathologizing everything that isn't cleanly rational, we haven't cured the madness, we've just made it permanent. Our anxieties, our burnouts, our deep sense of modern existential isolation, these are the symptoms of a mind trapped entirely in the day. The Greeks were smart enough to know that the human soul needs the night, because sometimes the only way to find out who you truly are is to completely let go of who you think you are in the dark.